Welcome to the Who's Left podcast, a show about Indiana politics, history, and culture from the unapologetic perspective of the social democratic left. My name is Scott Aaron Rogers, and I am live from Bloomington. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce my guest tonight. First, Indianapolis City Councilor, District 13, Jesse Brown. Jesse, welcome.
Hello, hello. Good to be back.
Every time I see you, you're ruffling feathers, man.
Yeah, it's not out of my way. It comes pretty naturally, so.
And also tonight, first-time guest, former Indianapolis City County Councilman Ethan Evans. Ethan.
Howdy.
Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
I appreciate you being here. So, the reason we are gathered here tonight, live, on a special occasion, is because just recently, what was the date on that, Jesse? When we were removed from the caucus?
Monday. So it's the 6th.
Monday.
It was on the 3rd. Yeah, very recently.
Yeah. So our good friend Jesse here was on Monday removed from the Democratic caucus by a majority of the other Democratic city council members. That's where we are. It's been in the news. It's been in all the rags. They're talking about it on the social media. Do they still make rags? Anyway, Jesse, I'm going to let you take over and kind of tell us the backstory about what happened and how we sort of got to where we are today.
Yeah, absolutely. So to rewind a couple years, right? Well, let's rewind even further than that. I knew of Ethan Evans as being affiliated with Indy 10, which was our local kind of Black Lives Matter movement. He's a person who I knew always stood on the side of justice and did the right thing. And I was not paying a ton of attention to municipal politics during his term. And so I kind of saw him getting sidelined and didn't seem like he was getting fair treatment, but I didn't really know the whole story. Didn't think much about it. And Ethan and I had talked a few times, I want to say, but we weren't close friends or anything like that. I don't think I ever offered him any support while he was on the council, and that's on me. But it was pretty funny. I remember after my election, I was like, hey, actually you can kind of see it, on my bookshelf. This big white book right here is called Claiming the City, which is this massive tome about municipal socialism over the years. And I at a conference met the author and I was like, hey, do you know of any other socialists who were ever in the Indianapolis City Council? He's like, no, I don't think I did. So I posted on Twitter and I was like, hey, I think I'm the first ever socialist, Democratic socialist elected to the Indianapolis City County Council. And Ethan just quiet,
repeated this claim.
Yeah, quiet, mild-mannered as always. And the comments was like, I've always considered myself a Democratic socialist. I was like, oh shit, I'm sorry, dude. I wasn't trying to steal your claim to fame. But that's kind of been my perspective is all the stuff that I'm doing in terms of trying to stand up for justice, not care about self-aggrandizement, not care about trying to appease the powerful. Ethan was doing all of that last term, quieter, much kinder to his peers than I've been. And he got worse treatment as a result. And so that's kind of the point I'm hoping we can make here tonight together. But Ethan, I don't want to tell your story for you. I don't know. Can you talk about your time on the council and what that was like as somebody, an unapologetic lefty?
Well, thank you so much for the hype up, Jesse. And I really appreciate the kind remarks. I will say I came into it kind of bright-eyed running in 2019. I made the decision to run. If you remember, Mike McQuillan was the Republican minority leader at the time who had made a grave mistake putting forward a proposal called the Sit and Lie Ordinance back in 2018, which was vehemently opposed by almost everybody. That would have essentially criminalized homelessness and anybody sitting or lying in public spaces. So we big protest, everybody voted it down, and I decided to run at that time on the case of saying, hey, why don't we treat people with respect and dignity instead of criminalizing people? And that was my main mantra for the campaign, saying let's get people into housing and let's, not over police the city, and let's and this was while I was still with Indy 10, Black Lives Matter at the time as well, and saying like, hey, let's reduce the jail population, let's do this and that, and people were saying that's radical, that's all this and that. I was like, I just viewed it as helping people. I just thought it was, doing something that seemed natural and out of respect for human dignity. And honestly, a lot of people I talked to in the community shouted the same way when I went to people and was like, hey, do you think that people should be criminalized for being homeless? They're like, no. They're like, okay, cool, and let's not do that. And so that was my first foray. And I came in, we had the supermajority. I was one of 4 LGBTQ members for the first time. And I went into it, said like, hey, my first thing I want to do, I want to get affordable housing on the thing. I want to get, make sure that nothing passes that criminalizes homelessness like that. And I want to make sure that we have something that bars completion of any more jails or jail-like structures in the city for the foreseeable future. And I was able to get the last thing passed with a great deal of difficulty. It took a whole year to get a special resolution just saying we promise to not build a new jail in 50 years. And it only barely passed 16-9.
We have a little bit of a jail problem down here in Monroe County, and it's, as somebody who doesn't want to see jails be a thing. On one hand, I get it. Like, yeah, we don't want to see any jails built, but as long as we have this thing called jails in our society, like the one here is in poor condition, so they're going to be building a new one soon that's supposed to be like more humane and whatnot, and have all the drug treatment and outpatient facilities and parole and probation, all that other stuff sort of attached to it, because it's sort of spread out now down here. So I guess this is not to sidetrack, but I guess I could see why maybe there could be a need for a new jail at some point.
Well, I saw that, but the point was we were building a new jail at the time. So I was like, well, why?
Yeah.
The point is, this should not be hard to say, okay, for 50 years, this new jail should be it. Like, let's just make that agreement. And they're like, well, maybe 40 years. They're like, well, maybe. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, so it was like pulling hairs with everybody. And so that was my first big, thing, figuring out how things work inside government. Like going from here to there, saying like, okay, what do you want? What does this need to get passed? How does this need? Like going to the sheriff's office, counselor, mayor's office. It was a lot, but I finally did it. And then the next thing was getting the housing, and that was just a mess. And trying to get something passed on homelessness and housing in 2021. And in the meantime, in the middle of that, I was working on a proposal for an affordable housing commission. And right in the middle of that, I was interrupted by another counselor who accused me of leaking private caucus information out of nowhere. And I said, no, that's not true, because it wasn't true, what I was accused of. And then I thought that was the end of it. And then 2 weeks later, I got called in for a meeting with President Osley and Maggie Lewis. And they're like, hey, we were told by another counselor, that obviously I knew who it was, that you leaked private information from a caucus meeting. And I said, no, I didn't. That didn't happen. And they're like, well, you want to share your phone information and all this stuff with us? And I was like, well, I'd prefer not to, but like, I told them the truth, that I had said this other thing to a friend, that at the time the public comments were not being prefaced by the clerk until the next meeting had happened. After the last big public meeting, we had a big ruckus with some of the Indy 10 members, some other public members about a police funding proposal. And one of them was almost dragged out by the sheriff's deputies, and somebody was said an F-bomb, and President Osley got up in arms about it, and that caused the caucus to say, all right, we need to change the public comment rules, and we need to preface it by saying all this stuff about what you can't say, and you only have 2 minutes, and if we don't like what you say, then we have the right to kick you out. And so I just said to a friend offhandedly, hey, in the next meeting, they're going to start saying this stuff. And that was all I said, because I knew it was going to be public knowledge in the next meeting. So I told them that, thinking, all right, if I just tell them the truth, it's not going to matter. And then 2 weeks later, I get suspended from one of my 3 committees, and I get barred from another committee they were about to put me on for 6 months. So, and nothing happened to the other counselor that falsely accused me.
And for me, Ethan, maybe it was different back then, but right now in the Democratic caucus, as of Monday, right, because I was in it until Monday, everyone knew that everyone leaked things, not just to friends, but to the press, right? Abdul Hakim Shabazz runs his political gossip column, and everyone knew that almost every counselor had leaked things to him. They couldn't prove it, so they couldn't make someone in trouble, but Ali Brown said on the mic earlier this year, or not earlier this year, I guess late last year, that quote unquote, this caucus or this council leaks like a sieve, and we all know that. So she said that into public record, right? So it's not as though you were the only person who had ever said something. It's just you were the only person foolish enough
who
to
admitted
think
it.
Yeah.
Okay, so you are all elected officials, right?
Yeah.
You are being paid by the taxpayers of the city to conduct business on their behalf. They should be able to know what's going on. They should be able to know what you're doing.
Yeah.
It seems self-evident, but
I have a friend, another socialist, J.P. Leninger, who just got elected down in Louisville. And in the Louisville Council, their caucuses meet in public. Like the public could be in the room with them. And so they can plan political strategy, but they can't do so secretly. So there's no such thing as confidentiality. That's actually illegal. Like I have another socialist elected colleague, Richie Floyd, who is in Florida. And for him, any text message he sends about council business is discoverable. And they have very active public records officers who pursue that kind of stuff. So if you are doing any business at all, it's basically public knowledge. So it's not as though this is like carved on stone tablets from God and this is the way politics has to work. This is just the way that the Democrats in charge of our city choose to make it work.
Yeah, and again, we have to emphasize this the whole time. We're talking about Democrat on Democrat action right here. This is cannibalism, as it were. I mean, the two-party system makes for interesting bedfellows. I think we'll sort of get into that as this conversation goes on. So, Jesse, what happened to you most recently? What did because this is not the first time that you've run afoul of the caucus. But what's going on now?
Yeah. So if to catch our listeners up, in case you missed our last conversation on Who's Left about this, February of 2024, my second month on the council, there was a threat to expel me from the caucus over my activism and basically like antagonism of Aaron Freeman and just fight against his bill to kill the Blue Line at the State House. And even though they made it very clear that what they were mad about was starting beef with a Republican and maybe he would like penalize the city or retaliate in some way, what they actually accused me of was violating the caucus rules in the same way they accused Ethan. They said that I had violated caucus confidentiality. And the specific thing they claimed I had done is I mentioned a phone call I had gotten from Frank Mascari on the Southeast side, where he cussed me out and threatened me and just said it's better to be in the tent than outside the tent. I mentioned that. It got put in a socialist newsletter that has like 300 readers across the country. but I put a little clip of it in my email newsletter. They said, aha, you are betraying confidential caucus secrets. I don't know how a phone call that somebody calls me, right? Like somehow that's confidential. I didn't initiate that contact. But anyway, that's what their accusation was when they took a vote and I almost was expelled. This most recent time, they did not even accuse me of violating any caucus rules because I didn't. I didn't leak any secret information. What happened though, obviously many of my peers on the council have been against me from the beginning. There's still one person, Leroy Robinson, who refuses to text me back if I text him directly. You can scroll through my phone. It's just polite message from me to him over and over again, and he will not even respond because he doesn't think I'm a human being, I guess. But so, I've been facing rudeness and bullying the whole time, but I'm an adult and I have thick skin. I don't really give a shit. So that's fine. But I've also tried not to especially piss off the majority of my peers. I do want to work together. I think there's a benefit of being in a caucus together, et cetera. So I've tried to play by the rules as much as I could, although I'm always going to be pushing the envelope. That's kind of in my character. So January 5th of this year, 3 city county councilors who all have financial ties to the charter school industry, and that would be Carlos Perkins, Leroy Robinson, and Maggie Lewis, gave a press conference standing next to former Republican Mayor Greg Ballard saying, boy, gosh, this state house, they're talking about some bad stuff for IPS. And really, IPS is so poorly managed anyway. The fair thing to do, and the only way to avoid the state house having to come in and save you, would be if you just give away a bunch of resources to charter schools. Maybe you should just pay to bus students away from your school districts and to charter schools. Maybe you should just pay for resources and early childhood education, or just give tax dollars directly to charter schools.
Maybe you should roll over in advance, basically.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Oh my God, the big scary Republicans are out there. We better just give them what they want, and maybe they'll be nicer. Which, if anybody's ever been bullied, that's just not how it works, right? So
we give them a little bit of our lunch money.
Yeah, right. Maybe if we just give them milk money, they'll let us keep the lunch money. Or someday in the future, they'll have some respect for us as moral characters, and I don't know, some goofy theory, right? So I thought that was trash. I thought that was nonsense, and I was opposed to it and was quietly working against it for a long time. But I don't expect that everybody on the caucus has to be a socialist. I don't think that everybody has to stand for fully funded public education. I think they should. I think that's actually what the Democratic platform says in this state.
I think that's non-negotiable. And if you don't think that, you should get the hell out of the party. But I mean, who am I?
I think that too. I think it would be much more appropriate to expel those 3 than to expel me, quite frankly.
Yes.
But I know I don't have the power to say that, right? And so, cool, we'll have to agree to disagree. That's fine. But then my constituents started reaching out to me saying, hey, what the hell is going on with these text messages I'm receiving? I was like, what text messages? They would send them to me. IPS parents in my district, and again, none of those 3 counselors are in Center Township. They're all in Pike and Washington. But they were, I can't prove that they were sending these messages, but parents in my district were getting a well-produced, obviously, somebody paid money for somebody to set this campaign up, text messages saying, stop the state takeover of IPS. And then the text said, due to fiscal mismanagement and all these problems, IPS is at risk of being taken over by the state. Only you can help stop this. Click here. And they had a URL that was designed to look like this organic grassroots parent organizing URL, but 1 digit off. And if you click it, it automatically opened your email program and started composing an email to the head of the IPS school board saying, I stand with Maggie Lewis, Carlos Perkins, and Leroy Robinson in insisting that you give resources to charter schools. And so I was like, yeah, what the hell? And it used the same talking points that those 3 had used in their public statement at their public press release. And so I reached out in the caucus chat that we had and said, hey, what the hell? I didn't even say what the hell. I was like, hey, I've got some serious concerns.
Yeah.
These are some mysterious text messages. What's going on? And they answered the questions in such a way where they never technically said they didn't know what they were. They're like, oh, I saw those text messages this morning. They didn't say for the first time. They didn't say I didn't expect to see them. If anybody's watched the Wheel of Time show, it's like the Aes Sedai where they can't tell a technical lie, but that everything they say is intentionally misleading. Those were the kind of answers I was getting.
Oh my God.
And then I also got a lot of requests. Oh, just call me on the telephone, and we'll talk about this on the telephone. And to put it into context, the last time there was something contentious where I called Maggie Lewis on the telephone, It was about when I called for the mayor to resign over Thomas Cook's sexual abuse and the mayor's refusal to do anything about it. When I did that, I talked to Maggie on the phone. She said, gosh, you're calling for him to resign. Really? Until right this moment, I had not even thought of that. I had not even considered, never crossed my mind that we would be talking about that. So I'll have to think about it because you're catching me for the very first time right now. It's a weird thing to say, but okay, that's fine. Sure. Got off the phone, talked to another peer on the phone who was like, yeah, I just got done talking with Maggie for 45 minutes about whether or not we should call for him to resign. So she just straight up lied to me about something important. And I couldn't prove it because there was no paper trail, right? It was just over the phone. And so I was like, respectfully, I would like something in writing this time. And Maggie said, I would like $1 million, but I guess neither of us are going to get what we want. And I said, I find that really unacceptable. Like, you're texting my constituents. What are you talking about? And they started throwing laugh emojis on my statements. And so I was like, okay, you wanted me to be respectful and come quietly and try to talk to you behind closed doors, but you're just like lying about this. You are lying.
And then laughing in my face about having done so.
Right. Leroy's response, by the way, was like,
decorum.
I can't respond to any at all, ridiculous allegations. This was probably from some white socialist organization based in Seattle, for all we know. And I think the counselor did this himself. I was like, are you accusing me of doing this? Because if so, please say that directly. And he just wouldn't respond. So I was like, okay. So I made a Facebook post. And my Facebook post said, I suspect that these 3 counselors, and I tagged them, are behind this series of text messages. And I find that unacceptable. I privately asked them if they denied it. None of them did. I'm going to ask them again publicly. That's what my post said. It didn't say they're monsters who eat children. It didn't say they're terrible people or they're liars, which I do believe. I didn't say that, though. I just said exactly what I'm pretty sure I just read word for word what that Facebook post was. I immediately got a screenshot in the caucus chat from Maggie Lewis, just of that post. And earlier, while mocking me, she said, I said what I said. And so I responded, what was that quote of yours? I said what I said. And then she did the wow react. And that was the last I heard from her until I was expelled from the caucus. So
it's so petty.
Yes.
These people are elected officials. You are there. You are supposed to be serving your constituents, and you're acting like the fucking cool kids table in the high school cafeteria.
Yes, it's the Mean Girls.
Why? Why are you there? Are you there to advance your own careers? Are you there to lord over some little fiefdom with no real power? You just get to be a little more comfortable than your neighbors because you got somebody who'll throw money at you and buy you nice things. I don't know. I thought we sent you there to work for the people, to work for your constituents, to defend public education, like the IPS, taxpayers of Indianapolis. That's theirs. They paid for that with their tax dollars over decades and decades.
Yeah, and these
Vichy Democrats want to come in here and work with Republicans to sell off the public good for parts.
Yep.
It's horseshit.
Yes, it is. And again, they all have financial ties that they would economically benefit from this happening. And I didn't call that out. I didn't say, expose them. I didn't say, hey, everyone, I call on you to march on their houses and with torches and pitchforks or something like that. I just asked them a question publicly is what I did.
That smells like corruption. I don't know.
It is corruption. The dictionary textbook definition of corruption. But I knew something was up because the conversation stopped so suddenly. I was like, uh-oh, that's probably a problem. Then Friday afternoon, I got they always on Friday afternoon send out the public notices for the next week for all the different council meetings, the committee meetings that are going to be scheduled. They sent that. A couple hours later, they sent, hey, updated schedule. There's also going to be a committee on committees meeting on Tuesday. And the committee on committees is a special meeting where it's only VOP, Maggie, and the Republican leader. 3 people are on that committee. And their only job is to assign people to committees or remove people from committees. And having known what happened to Ethan, having seen what they've done to previous counselors who stepped out of line in previous terms, I had a very strong suspicion that this was to remove me from committee assignments. And frankly, I didn't think they were going to just expel me over this since I knew I hadn't broken any rules. I thought that they might just like try to suspend me from a committee or something like that. So I was expecting to rally supporters to go to the committee meeting Tuesday just to like try to stop them from shenanigans. But caucus leader Lewis sent out an agenda for our caucus meeting on Monday. I went in there, was having small talking with a bunch of my colleagues. We started the meeting, and immediately Maggie looked over at Frankie Mascari, and Frankie raised his hand and said, "Madam Leader, I'd like to introduce a motion to expel Jesse Brown from the caucus." A couple people made a couple quick comments, and the vast majority, I answered a couple questions, or no one asked me a question. I kind of defended myself, just some basic factual information and my perspective on this, that I was protecting my district in the IPS system and doing what my constituents wanted. And then 13 of my 18 colleagues voted to expel me from the caucus. Only 3 of them explained their vote. No one accused me of doing anything wrong. The 3 explanations were: one person did not like that I had invited protesters to give public comment during a public testimony session at the council meeting. He was like, "Well, you organized all those protests and made them disruptive and like tried to get people to break the law." I was like, "That's not true." He said, "Well, I saw your social media post."
Pete did that when I was there.
Right.
Why didn't they vote against the police budget like I did?
Exactly right. So I was like, "Okay, was that a violation of the rules?" He was like, "No, it bothered me." I was like, "Okay." Another person said I'd been mean to people on social media. And then a third person just said, like, gave me a long condescending speech about how I had forced his hand to do this because, I just like owed my colleagues more questions and more time to answer. He's like, "So what? If people just don't give you the appropriate answer immediately, you're just going to put them on blast?" I was like, "That's not what happened." They answered me, and they answered that you're not going to get any more information. And then they laughed at me. This wasn't like they were busy at work and I didn't give them a chance to answer. They had definitively answered my question by saying, "You don't get shit from me." So those are the only 3 comments made. No one accused me or alleged that I had broken a rule, but they just expelled me anyway. And then it was kind of funny because Maggie looked over at me and said, "You're excused." I just sat a little bit back further in my chair. I said, I understand that that's your opinion." She said, "No, you're excused." I said, "I'm not going anywhere. I don't think you have the legal authority to just remove me for a personality conflict. I'm a duly elected Democrat, and I'm not moving." And so she said, "Well, we'll have to call somebody then." I was like, "Guess you will." So they called in sheriff's deputies, and the sheriff's deputies came in and just kind of stood and kind of glared at me from outside the room, and I waved at them. And I was like, "Hi." And then they kind of whispered together because I wasn't actually doing anything wrong. They didn't have the right to do what they were doing. I had every right to be in this public building, sitting in a chair where I had sat down with them. And so they muttered to each other for a little bit. And then the entire caucus got up, left the room, and found another room to meet in, which was kind of funny.
Again, it's high school behavior. They complain about decorum and norms and rules, and my God, it's
a combination.
Lunch table. It's Mean Girls.
It's that, and it's silly, and it's worth laughing at. But then it's also, we look at why we have a fucking President Trump right now, right? And it's because the Democrats just like, "Oh my gosh, we can't overrule the parliamentarian. Oh, decorum suggests that we can't stack the Supreme Court because what if Trump does something against the law?" And now look at what's fucking happening. Trump is just bulldozing every law, shredding the Constitution. And by the time anybody catches up with them, there's going to be damage that's not possible to rescue. Like, we have to get a little bit bolder, and we have to actually like push for things and get real and stop just treating cultural norms and preferences as though they are like written in stone and we cannot change them. It's just ridiculous.
You said like the reason we have President Trump is kind of, the Democrats refusing to actually stand up and fight and, going along to get along and, compromising with fascists and, like you said, giving the bully their milk money. This is one of the downstream effects of gerrymandering in the state house, right? So one of the techniques the gerrymanderers use is packing. So they will pack all the Democrats into the city of Indianapolis. They say, all right, you guys do your thing there. We've got the rest of the state map set up to favor us. They concede the city. So at that point, okay, like the only people in the city that are elected officials are Democrats. So business interests who support the Republicans in the state house and all over the place, they find malleable Democrats or even people that were Republicans or for all intents and purposes are Republicans, but they got to stick a D next to their name if they want to get elected in the city, like Eric Adams in New York. You got a bunch of Eric Adams on the city council with you.
Yeah, and here's what's worse though, is because the people who are paid off or at least getting rich, right? The people who are just more conservative and you have to be a Democrat to run Indianapolis, they're doing what they want and what their values suggest. But the majority of my peers on the council agree with me behind closed doors. They're just unwilling to rock the boat or deathly afraid of interfering with the state house. And, they think, which is true, right? The state house under law. Well, here, let me rephrase this because I was talking with my wife about it and she corrected me. There is a fringe right-wing theory, legal theory, that the Indiana State House could just dissolve the city of Indianapolis because it's not specifically called out in the Constitution that we should have a local government. It is a creature of the State House, is this fringe, batshit right-wing conspiracy theory. However, it is true.
Community, and
it is true that right now the majority of our state house is fringe, batshit right-wing conspiracy theorists, and so it might be reasonable that they will try to execute on this theory. And the fact that they theoretically might be able to do this is what keeps my peers up at night, freaking out and just insisting that we cannot ever poke the bear. We can't ever upset the state house because who knows what they could do, and it would be devastating. But my contention is, look at what's happened for the last 20 years in Indiana. Are we closer to breaking the supermajority? Because I don't think so. I don't think we're closer at all. I see voters abandoning the Democratic Party in droves because they see we don't fight for anything, we don't stand for anything, and all we do is kowtow and it's Republican light. Who wants to vote for that? They stay home instead. So I maintain that even if we fight and lose, even if we get a horrible black eye, even if the Republicans come in and really shove us down and take our lunch money, next time we stand up and fight, a lot more people are going to fight with us, and that's the only path to actually winning. That's my theory.
Yeah. Ethan, you have something to say? I've let you go quiet for too long.
No, I agree with what Jesse said about standing up and fighting, because I had that feeling for the last essentially 2.5 years I was on the council. I got the feeling that there was a lot of trepidation and I don't want to say fear, but hesitation in everything that the council and the mayor's office was doing with regards to not wanting to upset the state house. That if I put forth a proposal for the affordable housing, if I put forth a proposal about police reform or the redistricting reform right before we had it actually in 2022, the things I would hear back is well, we've got our own thing, or well, we don't want to do this through this avenue, or well, do it. The DMV already has this, or do it through IMPD, or do it through this other thing. We don't need any other things to do it. Essentially, they were just pawning every new idea off onto already existing departments. And I was well, the reason I'm bringing it to you is because they're not doing it right now. The whole reason I want an affordable, it was literally just a committee on affordable housing to study, how to make it better. And they're well, if it's just a committee, then what's the point? It's okay, then let's do something. I'm well, then that's the mayor's purview. I'm you're just coming up with excuses to not get something done at that point. Literally the biggest example of this was when I finally got the proposal through after talking with the whole of the city departments, OPHS, DMD, the mayor's office, all these nonprofits that were supportive of the Affordable Housing Committee proposal. Even the ARP chimed in. And I got it in late 2022 after I'd, gotten independent and out of the caucus. Finally got it to a committee, and Maggie Lewis was the chair of the committee and headed up. Zach Adamson had a amendment to it that I was fine with, talked through, and then questions came. The only people with questions on it were Republicans. And I answered them fine. I was like, hey, why does this need to be a committee? I was like, because the current DMD doesn't operate on this affordable housing. I feel like it would be helpful. We have like 5, 6 nonprofits that are willing to help out on this. Nobody was able to show up to talk on it, unfortunately, but I had like statements pre-read from them in support of it. And so once the questions were done, I went to vote and nobody said anything. Like nobody made a motion, nobody did anything. And that was their way of killing the proposal without taking a vote. So they essentially were able to.
You spent what, 10, 20 minutes just like explaining it, answering all the questions?
Explaining it, saying how much support it had from across the city, across the community, saying how much, positive support. And then it was just on video, you can see just the silence from me, like looking at them, all the Democrats and Republicans, and they were just sitting there in silent, like for a whole 30 seconds. And then it's like, well, proposal failed. I was like, okay, all right.
Yeah. Wow.
And I just took my stuff and left.
And see, that's, I think, so Ethan just tried to be a decent person and not just like put people on blast or attack their character. But I would be showing up at their church and telling everybody, hey, do you understand that your fellow counselor, just to be a spiteful little asshole, stopped us from having an affordable housing commission? Like, is this what you want your taxpayer money to be funding? Like, go watch this video and see if this makes sense to you. But Ethan was a nice guy, and they absolutely screwed him over time and time again.
They did that twice. They did that twice to me. The second time, I wanted to amend Bob's proposal on homelessness and tents on the sidewalk, which was basically an amended no sit and lie proposal that I told him about in 2021. They said, like, this is essentially no sit lie light. And he said, no, it's not. And I was like, read this to me and tell me what's not. And he said, well, it's not a fine immediately. It's a warning. I was like, what happens after the warning? I was like, it's a fine. I'm like,
this is why people hate Democrats, and it hurts us. It hurts the brand. It hurts us everywhere in the state, not just in the city. And every election, year after year after year, Republicans could say, "Oh, look at these Democrat-run cities. They're terrible." Well, I mean, yeah, sometimes, yeah, because these aren't the best Democrats we've got here. They're careerists and chasing the next rung on the ladder and not actually worried about their constituents, and it's gross.
Yeah, and to me, the worst thing is, there's a lot that you could say about problems Indianapolis has that are indeed the state house's fault, right? Like the road funding formula is super unfair, starves us of the ability to maintain our streets. We're not allowed to freaking ban right turn on red. They do all sorts of stuff to make sure we're fighting with one arm handcuffed behind our back, right? But we also have some of the most profitable companies in the United States based in Indianapolis. So the Lilly Foundation, I think it was like 10 times last year in the front page of IBJ. They're like, we have more money than we know what to do with. We have to pay taxes if we can't give it away. Won't someone ask us for money? We have a mayor and a council leadership that just doesn't want to embarrass them by publicly saying, hey, look at this massive need right down the street from your headquarters. Can you help us build affordable housing instead of having a homeless encampment?
Yeah.
Like, we don't have to be rude. We don't have to put them on blast. We could come privately and say, we'll name the building after you or something. I'm fine with that. Whatever, like, tax the rich. But in the meantime, like, just ask the rich for help to pay their fair share. And we're just not doing it.
Yeah. Is it what that Lilly situation is extremely bothersome because they're saying, hey, please, we want to give away this money. If you look at the Indianapolis Democratic machine, sort of, as it were, the way that this thing gets fueled is those corporations, real estate developers, charter school companies, things like that. And it does. It holds the rest of us back because not only is this who's in charge is in Indianapolis, right? The Indianapolis machine also essentially runs the state central committee. So, like, well, now you're affecting me. The bad governance in Indianapolis affects me in Bloomington. It affects people up in the region. It affects people down in Kentuckiana. So we've got reorganization coming up here in the next few weeks. These are things that Democrats at the grassroots level, your precinct committee people, need to think about when you're picking leaders for the party at the county level, at the city level. Who do they work for, and who are they going to vote for a level up? It's like the same people. They just like to hold court over their little domain, that is the party. They've got their little areas. They got the cities, they got Indianapolis, they got the region, they got little spots here and there. And they're okay with that. They're comfortable. They don't want to be made uncomfortable in any way. And you said the State House and the White House and the Congress, and they're full of right-wing radicals right now. That it's the bullies. You can't bargain with them. They're only going to take more and more and more. They're doing it now. We have to act like a real opposition party for once, and stand up and fight these people and say enough somewhere. Where do you say enough? I'd say public schools is a good hill to die on.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, I just, especially, it's one thing to quietly say, gosh, I don't know that we can fight back. Maybe this isn't one we try to take a public stand on. It's another thing to be standing with I said fellow Republicans, with Republicans, on the State House steps saying, hey, we are calling on IPS to give away resources. That's I use the phrase, and I'm glad you continue to use it. It's Vichy Democrats, right? So it's saying we should collaborate with the occupiers because this will make things go easier for us, right? And it might make things go easier for the people in power, but it certainly won't make things easier for those of us at the bottom.
Maybe they'll use a little bit of lube when they fuck us.
Harsh but fair.
Well, okay. So now you said you had good turnout. You had constituents show up when
yes.
they were going to strip you of your committee assignments,
right?
Because they were stripping your constituents of their committee assignments, right?
That's exactly right. And one thing that my peers or anyone should learn about me is one of my strongest superpowers is the ability to just dash out a pretty good email really quickly, especially because my wife, Mary Kate, is amazing at helping me edit and coming up with things 10 times as well as I could write myself. And so when you make the first order of business at the caucus meeting kicking me out, caucus starts at 5:30, council meeting starts at 7. So that gave me an hour and a half to compose my thoughts, write an email, and start reaching out to constituents and supporters. And so by the time the council meeting started, I had emailed my like 750 person email list just saying, hey, some shit's going down. This is what's happening. Call your friends. We need help. And so thanks to that email going out quickly, I mentioned on Twitter what happened right away, mentioned on Facebook. I think it was almost 60 people showed up the next day at the Committee on Committees meeting. And it was pretty funny as it approached and the council started realizing what was happening and how much people were upset. Because then on Twitter, you can even still look at it. It's still posted there. The council normally just does like no subjectivity. It's all just objective facts. But they're like, hey, by the way, this Committee on Committees meeting has nothing to do with Jesse Brown. Nobody's getting resent. This isn't, you don't need to come here. Please don't come here. Because it's a public meeting. And it's required by law, even in this fascist state, which requires barely anything of our elected officials. Yeah. It is required by law to give public notice and to provide accessibility for anybody in the public who wants to attend. And just a real quick aside, put a pin in the main story. The public notices that go out say, if you have accessibility concerns, if you're handicapped, disabled, anything like that, deaf, language impaired, reach out to the council and we'll help you. But you have to reach out prior to 48 hours before the meeting starts. And they intentionally only send out the notice 48 hours before the meeting starts. So if you're unable to achieve things without accessibility help, you just can't fucking participate in public policy in this city, I guess. But anyway, take the pen back out and let's go back to the main story. They intentionally tried to discourage public participation, even though it's legally required. And in fact, some of my fellow counselors, supporters of mine, were like, oh, I'm pretty sure that like counts as executive session. Public's not allowed there. I was like, wrong, actually. That's not true. Again, I have a lawyer wife. So, very clear. This is a public meeting. Public's allowed in. But they hold the meetings for the Committee on Committees in Vop's office, in his conference room, which is the conference room, maybe the size of this room I'm sitting in right now. It's designed like 5 people can sit around the table comfortably. And so we squeezed almost 60 people into that room in the lobby right outside. And so there's some hilarious pictures outside of Vop and Maggie looking very uncomfortable and frustrated about the fact that their plans to scuttle my committee assignments got ruined because they couldn't do it in front of all these angry people. And some of those angry people, by the way, were like the president of the local Teamsters union, people from the teachers union, people from a bunch of like prominent like groups that are actually well respected in the city. Maybe they didn't know that because they
nominally, the party's base, right?
Important people, right? Yeah, exactly. The party's base. And so excellent photo ops and was able to defeat their attempts to remove me from committees. But so I am taking the initiative and not stopping there because I hoped I would get some support. I figured I'd get some people frustrated with me, but in this case, everyone seems to agree. Not everyone. I've received at this point, I think 1,100 messages almost. That's including texts, emails, Facebook messages, 1,100 different people. So by far the most messages I've ever received in any week of my life as a human being. 2 of them so far have said, I don't think you did the right thing here. The rest are all, I support you, keep fighting. So it's the strongest margin I've ever seen. I did a Wish TV interview where they said that the news channel had gotten 60 emails from people within like a day of this happening. I didn't ask anybody to contact the media. They just chose to do that on their own. So just massive public outcry. So I'm taking the opportunity to punch back at the bullies. So again, I was sat on 3 committees when I first joined, and I tried to be a good team player. And I was like, well, you don't trust me. I'm new. I beat your friend, Zach, and I'm sorry. So I don't need to have the best committee assignments. I can just take a step back and just let you take the lead and slowly prove myself. They're like, bet. And so they put me on 3 shitty committees. And I fought back. I got on one of the ones I really wanted, municipal corporations. I'm grateful for all my committees. I think good work can be done on every single one. I'm not trying to get rid of any of the ones I have. But I did not get any of my top preferences, and obviously did not get like to chair a committee or anything like that, despite the fact that I won my election by the widest margin from anybody on the whole council.
Yeah. But you're a freshman, right? You gotta wait your turn.
For sure. I'll play the game nicely. But I did notice, weirdly enough, like for example, Carlos Perkins, who got in bed with the charter school industry immediately upon being seated, pissing off his campaign manager and top supporters while doing it, by the way. But he got sat on 6 committees. And he is a pastor at a church and does important work for the IU School of Philanthropy. and does conferences and tours all the time. So he has a busy day job, has children, and is a pastor. I have no day job, and I was on 3 committees. Other example, Nick Roberts, nice guy, hardworking guy. This is his first real job, I think it's fair to say. He was 24 years old when he won his seat. He still has a day job, which is working with the trustee, and yet he was on 6 committees as well. So,
right,
like, these are also novice
another
politicians.
vote against you, to kick you out of the caucus.
Right. And so
Alex,
I'm taking this opportunity to say, hey, like, whether I'm a duly elected Democrat, I do think we should be able to fight, and I should get my seat back in the caucus. But regardless of whether you sit me back in the caucus, give me my fair committee assignments, because the Committee on Committees is 2 Democrats and 1 Republican. And right now there's not a Republican on the city council who serves on as few committees as me. So it's once again, literally, Democrats choosing to give Republicans more power rather than give a fellow Democrat who they find kind of annoying the equal amount of power that they're giving their peers. So
I've heard that one of the arrows directed at you is, well, he's not even a Democrat, he's a communist.
I am. I absolutely. I will not ever run from that word, because
are you now, or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party?
Exactly right. Like, you're not going to red scare me into trying to run from that. Thomas Horrocks, I don't know if you guys probably saw that.
I love Thomas. Great guy,
sweet guy. He's a pastor, right? A National Guard member. They sent a hate mail and attack mail to about him, featuring the hammer and sickle, saying that he was a communist. So you can't avoid this slur anyway.
Literally, all he did is go out there and, repeat the words of Jesus Christ.
Exactly right. So you can't avoid that, and I refuse to run from it. So I will never, ever deny any word you want to use about my left-wing politics. That's fine. But at the end of the day, that's not what I'm pushing for. I didn't get in trouble for trying to, do a struggle session on Maggie Lewis, or try to brainwash Leroy Robinson into the Manchurian candidate or something. No, it was for public education, which is part of the Democratic Party platform. I am a socialist, right? I consider myself an anarchist in the past. I absolutely want the Democratic Party to change radically. I don't think we should be accepting money from billionaires. I don't think we should be such hierarchy. I think we need to be transparent and open. But this is the only party I've ever voted for as a 39-year-old man. Even as a crazy anarchist with dreadlocks, I still held my nose and voted for John Kerry to try to get us out of the war in Iraq. Like, I always have held my nose and done the shitty thing and voted for the uninspiring Democrat. I've never voted third party. I don't think I've ever missed a primary. I'm an elected precinct committee person. If I'm not a Democrat, then you're literally just making it up as you go along. Who is and isn't? So, yeah.
It's supposed to be our values that drive us, not playing nice.
Exactly.
Why do you get into politics if it's not to acquire and utilize power, hopefully on behalf of your constituents and not on behalf of yourself?
Actually, Scott, you must be new to politics. No, you get involved in politics to have a really great group, 13 friends or so, and you get to hang out in the mayor's suite and go to all the Pacers games, and you get free canapes passed around at events. That's why you get into politics. I'm surprised you didn't know
that. God, it is said about Nazi Germany, and in general about fascist authoritarian societies in general, that a third of the population would kill another third of the population while the remaining third watches. So you got 3 groups, right? Well, this is a 2-party system in this country. So let's say the Republicans are all in the group that would gladly kill a third of the population, right? A lot of the Democrats, half maybe, would gladly watch. And now is not a time to watch and be comfortable. It is a time to organize, maybe take off your jacket, roll up your sleeves, and get dirty.
Yeah. And I will do a weird thing really quickly and stand up for a couple Republicans, because I want to say it's your stances on policies and your actions that determine whether or not I'm going to fight you, right? I'm a pacifist, but I'm saying, fight your policies and try to block your political progress.
As it were, metaphorically, yes.
Right. But I've got Republican peers who have proposed good policy that I happily would second and vote for. I'm through Democratic Socialists of America. I am running a Who Owns Indianapolis project, where we are mapping out the campaign finance of every elected official starting in the city and moving on to the state after that. Going to create an awesome donor database. It'll be super badass. We already had one session where 43 people joined us and started mapping out campaign finance together. So it's been a lot of fun. I know my Democratic peers know about it, because they kind of made some kind of guarded, like, so are you having fun with that? Like, I don't know, kind of glaring at me. So they're aware of it. They didn't offer to help. One of my Republican colleagues, Derek Cahill, said, hey, I love what you're doing. Transparency is great. It's going to take you forever to pull things down. Let me just send you a spreadsheet of all my financial information. So we double checked it, of course, but he made our jobs easier and tried to make things more transparent for the people. So yes, he has an R next to his name, but that is good behavior. I thank him for it, here publicly.
Yeah.
So, it's not just like every Republican
I'll say this about most Republicans.
Yeah.
They're going to be a piece of shit to your face. Not these guys. It sounds like these are nice guys that you're talking about. But again, for the most part, Republicans have a reputation. Like, you know what you're getting. They are the outward bully. They're not the toady,
Right. They're going to be direct.
They're
going to say the same thing. Yeah, in any room, especially in this age of Trump. But I mean, I think regardless, Josh Bain is another of my Republican colleagues who his politics in mind in terms of like cultural things, like abortion, trans rights, immigrants, police, we're as far apart as two human beings could probably be. But he will say what his issue is and what he wants to do. And that's actually what he's trying to do. And I never hear from anybody that he's back channeling or just saying one thing, but trying to do another. He's direct, and he'll answer questions about it, and he's transparent about it. And so I'm like, I can work with you any day. I'll vote against you more often than not, but I can happily have a productive dialogue and figure out if there's that 1% we do agree on, let's work together on it. Whereas with many of my peers in the Democratic caucus, I would get misleading, evasive answers, or they would just straight up lie to me. So I don't know what am I supposed to do?
I will give Republicans credit for this. They tell you what they're going to do before they do it. They'll give you 900 pages of it and say, oh yeah, we're gonna fuck you this way, and this way. And then they do it. I mean, it's awful. It's terrible, but it's transparent.
Yeah, I mean, it often is. It often is. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think
we're coming up on an hour, gentlemen. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to jump in on that.
I was going to say we're coming up on an hour. Yeah, and I just want to let you guys have a chance to say a few closing words, Ethan. Yeah, go where you were going with that.
On that no new jail proposal, the very first one I had, Michael Paul Hart was the first counselor to reach out and say he would help me with it. Of all the people, the Republican, I was like, kind of taken aback. I was like, really? Now, he did eventually vote against it, along with all the Republicans, for obvious reasons. But he was behind the scenes, helping out with. I was like, I was not expecting that.
Upside down.
I appreciate a knife in the front. Closing words for us, Jesse.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is a desperate situation, right? And everyone I know who is not getting involved in politics is freaking the F out, right? So, we've got reports of ICE raids. We've got Trump saying he's opening up Guantanamo Bay and going to send migrants there. It's Trump saying we're going to occupy Gaza as the United States, or start a trade war or a real war with Canada. Shit's bad. Things are really bad right now. Elon Musk is just running our federal government as an unelected dictator. Yeah, it's really bad. And so part of me almost feels like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Fighting these comparatively petty local battles when there's this much stuff on the line. But this is what we have the opportunity to fight on, right? This is where you can actually walk down the street and walk into that committee on committees meeting and change policy.
Yeah.
And you change policy not just for me, right? It's not just about help my district. It's about wake people up to the fact that they have power and nothing happens without their consent. That third of the population you talked about that's just sitting there watching might not realize, oh shit, we actually could stand in the way and we could shut this down. The third that's trying to kill everybody are a bunch of bullies who will back down quickly when they realize that they're outnumbered. We can fight back, and I think it's important we fight back on local levels and then keep on fighting and keep building as we go. Got the mic.
I love it. You plant your flag where you're at, and you say, like, you shall not pass. You know, like, you're at some point you gotta stop and say enough in my neighborhood. All right.
If I could have one last closing remark, just like,
Absolutely.
I know
sir.
we're dumping on the Democrats, deservedly so for some of them, but like the Republicans are out and out fascists right now, and like what Jesse said, you got to take the fight them, and we I don't want to speak out of line for Jesse yet, but like I left because I wanted to make what I felt was a party in need of change better, because it needs to be better. It needs to be from the ground up, not the top down, which is what I was seeing. And that's how it can, be what it's supposed to be, a for the people party. And that's how we win. That's how we can make, oh my God, I almost said
No, I mean, you're totally right. Yeah, I mean, we have, I mean, I'll go a step further, and maybe you'll agree with me, maybe you'll disagree. But the old status quo Democratic Party has to die. It has to die, and it'll either die and take all of us with it, or it'll die and give room for something new. And that might be called the Democratic Party. It might be called. We might be in a Whigs Republican Party situation where it actually does change the name and the format right now. But things just drastically have to change if our country and world have a future.
Yeah, and we pick on the Democrats because we need the party. It for whatever it is still one of the best tools, best structures we have to fight the fascism that is staring us in the face. And we only pick on you because we love you. We don't bother with them. We don't tell the Republicans how they need to improve. We tell the Democrats how they need to improve because we love you and we need you to be your best. So please, for the love of God, fight with us or get out of the way. All right, gentlemen. Jesse Brown, Ethan Evans,
Always a pleasure,
thank you very much. I appreciate you. And that is going to be it for the Who's Left podcast tonight. Until next time, I'm Scott Aaron Rogers. Love each other, Indiana.